All right, folks. So sorry, I'm gonna cut in here. We're having a bit of delay on my screen, but sorry about that. So I'd like to just officially welcome everybody to the first of our social innovation track panels here. You might be surprised to find food in the social innovation track, but I hope that you won't feel that way after we hear from these phenomenal guests that we're joined by this morning, or this afternoon rather. So just to kick things off, I'm going to actually first introduce our moderator, Jeff Devereaux, who you may know, folks in Hartford from the No Good Market, among many other things. And I'll let Jeff introduce the two panelists. I would also just encourage folks to make use of the chat so that we can source up questions as we go through this afternoon's next hour together. So Jeff, thank you so much and take it away.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and super happy to be here on the panel and be joined by some wonderful guests. I'll cut right to the chase here and start introducing our wonderful panelists. First up today, we have Willard Lewis, also known as Chef Day, food philosopher with a pretty serious passion for sustainability in all forms. Most notably recently, I'm told, for his Baby J's Spice label. And he was just mentioning that he's got a new cookbook on the way. So we'll be excited to learn more about that today.
Yeah, honored to be here. Thank you very much. And you hit it right on the nose.
Wonderful. Next up is Carrie Wheaton, Executive Director of Forge City Works, formerly Billings Forge Community Works, which some folks probably still know it as. Middle of a rebrand. But Carrie has a long history in the food industry, most of which is in Boston, which we're excited to learn more about your background and how you found a little bit of a combination of two worlds here in Hartford.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Nice to see everybody.
Wonderful. To start off, I'd love to dive a little bit more into your backstories in the food industry, but also other experience that inform your work now. Based on what I've heard, it sounds like for both of you guys, it's been not just about food, it's been about other things and how that combines with your passion and interest and drive in the food industry and how that sort of led your path to today. Lillard, I'm told you were at one point in your career the chef to the stars. I was just sharing that I was listening to a Smokey Robinson album this weekend. Would love to dig in a little bit and hear more about your background and how you got your start and how you got to where you are today. Did we lose him for a sec? Uh-oh. All right, we'll come back. We'll come back to Lillard in a second. Carrie, your history in the food industry goes back quite a ways. I was reading an article that I found, and I recently found out that you actually got your start in the food industry as a server in Boston during grad school, which I think is bizarrely one of the ways many people find their way to the food industry. But I'd love to hear more about how you got your start and how you ended up here in Hartford.
Sure. So it was a long time ago, and I'm not going to say the year, but I was actually an AmeriCorps. It was then a Vista volunteer working on tenants issues and anti-racism work in Somerville and Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I decided I wanted to go to grad school, didn't want to ask my parents to pay for it, and decided I would get a job as a waiter. I got sucked into the craziness of the restaurant world. I love the fact that every day was a different day, that it was a collaborative experience in terms of building a good night in a successful restaurant. And I fell in love with it enough that within 8 months, I actually owned my first restaurant. I was very lucky. It was a time when it was way cheaper to get into the food business, and I had a little bit of family support. So you can tell from my white hair, I've been around for a while, and I owned my first restaurant when I was 29 years old. And since then, I've owned 5. I've owned a hot sauce and a spice rub company, Lord, a long time ago, and a catering business. So I've always been involved in food. always involved in different kinds of giving back and creating access to benefits for the folks who worked for me. And then around 18 years ago, I decided to sort of take advantage of or work through the other part of my brain. And I helped run a shared use kitchen incubator in Roxbury, Boston. I started to consult with nonprofits around food businesses. And then I got recruited to come here to Hartford, which is a longer story we'll probably take up a little bit later on.
For sure, for sure. Thanks so much, Carrie. Lillard, we were trying to start your intro, and we'll cut back to it. And I was saying that I'm told that at some point in time you were the chef to the stars, and we were listening to Smokey Robinson this weekend, and I'm told you might know him and a few others well, but would love to get a bit more about your backstory and how you got here today in the food industry and otherwise.
Sure. Well, it's not once upon a time, it still is. I still am in regular contact with a lot of my clientele, although it's a bit of a faux pas to name drop. But Smokey Robinson is one of my good friends, and he's a magnificent human being. My background is I own Food Incorporated. We're a multinational consulting firm. We specialize in handling items like food disparities, food deserts, consulting on the side of finding ways to implement sustainable policies for corporations and for educational institutions alike. My background is locally here, at least, is as Chef Jay. Most people know me in this district as Chef Jay. I have prepared meals for celebrities, for my corporate clients, as well as private individuals. In 2014, I produced a cookbook, the Gentleman's Cookbook, which you can still find in Barnes & Noble. And of course, I have a very lucrative background doing retail work as of recent with Geisler Supermarkets, where we have put several items on their shelves in Connecticut and Massachusetts. Most notably, my Earthang spice, ETSB as it is shorthanded, and it's very, very successful. Everybody seems to really, really like it, and it's one of my crowning achievements, actually, because it allowed me to work with my family, my friends, to put out something healthy for the community.
Awesome. Well, super excited to dive more into that and everything else later. So let's dig in a little bit. Carrie, I started my day today, as I often do, and where I often see you, which is having my morning breakfast sandwich and coffee at the kitchen. And I didn't get a chance to see you today, which is unfortunate, but I would love to learn a little bit more about where you're at now and really why you do what you do.
Sure. And thanks, Jeff. You are one of our regular customers, so we're happy to have that. So I'm the executive director of Forge City Works, and we use food to provide opportunities for people, particularly Hartford residents. And we do that in 3 different ways. One is we really respond to the lack of food access in our farmers market, which we have 2 more weeks of. It's every Thursday. It's been around now for 15, 16 years. We accept SNAP benefits, and we also work very hard to get resources to allow people to double and this year triple their SNAP benefits at our farmers market, which is great for farmers because it gives them some income. And they've been struggling this year for sure, but mostly great for families who are looking to put healthy food on their table. So if you bring $20 worth of SNAP benefits, you'll leave the market with $60 worth of healthy food. Super important. And then we run sustainable social enterprises. That means businesses that have a double bottom line. One is to be financially sustainable, but also to deliver on a mission. And in our case, it's providing jobs and job training opportunities for our community. So we have 2 kitchen cafes, one in Frog Hollow on Broad Street, and the other one in the downtown public library. We employ Hartford residents there, but we also have 2 training programs. At the library, we train young people identified as 18 years old to 24 years old in culinary customer service. Often people's first jobs, supporting folks about learning how to navigate the work world. And then we also help them in writing resumes, getting internships, and ultimately getting jobs. Very successful with that before the pandemic. And I'm sure we'll talk about what the impact of the pandemic has been on the food world. And then our major space on Broad Street trains adults in basic culinary skills. So those are folks who often have multiple barriers to employment. We work a lot with reentry people coming out of homelessness, addiction, poverty, and we teach them basic kitchen skills that allow them to support themselves and their families. And we raise about 50% of our income through our earned revenue. So when you come in and buy a sandwich, hopefully you're getting a delicious sandwich, but you're also supporting the mission. We also do catering as well.
Wonderful, Carrie. Thanks for that overview. You guys have been training local residents and youth for a long time. Any big highlights or wins you sort of jump out at you in your over a decade here doing this work?
I think the big message is that, we live in an incredible community with people who have unbelievable talents and abilities, and they're people that traditionally have not been given opportunity due to race, gender, poverty. And, when you work with people and you share what you have benefited from your background and learning, it's the best work that I've ever done. I would say that that's the biggest thing that jumps out at me.
I would piggyback on that if I could and associate myself with the comments of Ms. Wheaton. I mean, Ms. Wheaton and I have known each other for quite some time in the Hartford food scene, in the Connecticut food scene, really. And I'm proud to say that I'd say about 75% of the people who I've ever hired or worked with are folks who needed a second shot at things. They either made a mistake when they were younger and needed a little boost, a little helping hand, or they were ready. They just needed somebody to believe in them. And so I'm very proud to say some of my best employees and some of the people who I've worked with very closely over the years have been people who needed a second chance or people who needed a first chance. So, I mean, I love the work that Billings Forge and Carrie have been working on over the years. So just want to associate myself with those comments.
Thanks. Appreciate it and agree for sure.
Let's
I'm sure that we'll get to some of the impact of the pandemic though, because, I've been in this industry for a long time and always been proud of the fact that we are a place of second chances. But I think the pandemic and some of the, the showing people the racial environment that we're living in has also kind of pulled a little bit of a Band-Aid off of our industry. And, we need to come to the table and talk about equity and diversity and opportunities, because even in the restaurants that I've run or had, it does tend to get stratified where people of color end up making less money or stuck in positions without being given the opportunities that they should. So hopefully we'll talk about that a little bit too, because that's one of the things that I know that Willard certainly has been involved with for his entire culinary career, and that, we are really trying to address in the business that we have and the businesses that we hope to open going forward.
Yes.
Awesome. Gary, thanks so much for those comments, and I'll be sure to try to figure out how to work this in. But Willard, would love to hear a little bit more specifically about what you're working on these days with food, and more about Baby J's and your recent one, or relatively recent one with Geisler's, and hear what you have going on sort of day to day here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, we're really excited at Food Incorporated about what's happening. As we mentioned before, there are some things that we're dealing with as far as COVID. But I'll tell you this much: we are very excited about the Baby J spice line. Everything spices is taking off. People are using it on, as you'd imagine, everything. We're becoming very well known coffee tables and kitchen tables around the state and around the United States really are beginning to take notice to what we're doing here with providing a low cost, low sodium option to go up against the competition. But I think the retail side of things is exciting, but also what we're doing internationally. We're partnering with people overseas in Africa. We're partnering with people throughout the diaspora to create a brand new cookbook, a brand new media platform where we address through the cookbook, through plant-based eating, some of the particular cardiovascular natured health concerns of those throughout the African diaspora. And this includes chefs from all over the world, organizations such as Child Accra in Ghana. We're linking with organizations here, Yukon Central, my own corporation, Food Incorporated, as well as Geisler Supermarket, which is a very large regional grocery store. And we're bringing together a lot of different resources to put the information in people's hands. As Carrie said, you know, there are brand new revelations that are coming to light, and with COVID, we're finding it difficult to do things as we did in the past. So the innovation really is not only with the food, but it's also with the delivery system of the food. It's also with the delivery system of the information, right? The education. How do we meet the customer where they are? And as culinarians, that means a little bit more, because we are particularly interested in freshness and timing. You know, I mean, delivering, putting together deliverables for a culinarian, it takes on a whole new meaning because everything is so time sensitive. So the two projects that I'm very, very excited about are my new cookbook, the Food Philosopher, which is, as I mentioned, an international cookbook to be distributed throughout the African diaspora, Latin America, the Caribbean, and United States, as well as all of Africa. And of course, the Baby J's Everything Spice is just really taking off. We're so thankful to all of the customers and all of the community support, and the retail side of things, which is really where my company is headed now. I'm very proud to be spearheading that effort, because it is the change between, you know, the chef Jay, who was, you know, in the kitchen doing fantastic things, but now we need to move into the boardroom and start becoming a part of the intellectual and philosophical discourse behind some of the great issues surrounding food sustainability of our time. And that includes everything from caloric disparities between peoples, between neighborhoods, between nations, between cultures, as well as food waste, you know, the aftermarket food waste surplus that we find ourselves awash in at times. You know, my company is beginning to establish a good bedrock foundational amount of institutional knowledge on how to address that aftermarket surplus of food waste by 2030, dropping it by 30%.
That's amazing. When can folks get excited about pre-ordering your book or finding your book live?
Well, they can get excited. They can start getting excited about it immediately. Please, everyone, get excited about it immediately. But where I'm personally aiming for Valentine's Day 2021. I believe that that would be preferable for me. But the pre-orders might be available for Christmas time. So, and I will make sure that Jeff and you're the first one to know when the pre-orders are coming out.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thank you, Lillard, for sharing. And I think it's time to dive into some of the issues. We're dealing with a whole bunch of pandemics, and we've already named 3. So let's dive into those. We've got the COVID pandemic. We've gotten sort of renewed concern about regulations, not only within the country, but globally. We've got a global problem with sustainability and the environment. And we've got a lot of overlap between those things. But, you know, I think maybe I would say probably one of the top few most publicly hard-hit business industries has been the food industry because of the lockdown. And there's something we should maybe get into is some of the disparity between the retail side in terms of supermarkets and grocery stores and things like that, and the people who are making prepared foods and what that difference looks like. But yeah, I would love to dive into sort of what the challenges have been, where we've seen opportunities, and sort of what changes have come about because of these sort of three different things all sort of really bubbling to the surface, or creating or requiring change, whether legally or otherwise, in the last 6 or 7 months. Carrie, I'll put it to you first here. I mean, you, like many other restaurateurs, or you've had to make a hard decision to close a restaurant. I'd love to hear more about that and how you came to that hard decision.
So for those who are listening that don't know, I started and oversaw Firebox Restaurant, which was a fine dining farm to table restaurant in Hartford. Been around for 14 years. And it's owned by a family foundation whose purpose is to really provide opportunity for the community. And, you know, we literally went within 10 days from being open, being busy, having reservations, being crazily full, to being forced to close. So if you can imagine, if you've got a business, which for us it was with 46 employees, and an immediate closing with no potential of reopening in any near future. Those of us who are in the food business know that the margins are very, very slim. As the Lord talked about, we don't have sweaters we can put on a shelf and wait to sell in 6 months. We have lettuce and tomatoes and fruit and steaks and even wine and beer that don't have a long shelf life. So we made the very difficult decision to shutter. We didn't decide to shutter permanently until about 7 more weeks in, when it became clear that we wouldn't be allowed to reopen, but also clear the impact on a destination restaurant like Firebox, where many of our customers came from outside of the city and came in to go to the Bushnell or to a sports event or to the CT Forum. None of that was happening, and none of that is going to be happening for the next year. I think we had the added difficulty of a 125 seat restaurant. It's very hard to pivot a large restaurant. And I had the financial responsibility to protect the assets of a nonprofit family foundation, whose mission is to find and fight the causes of homelessness and to build strong communities. So, we wanted to make sure that we could do something in a sustainable way. So very hard, very heartbreaking. A lot of staff, phenomenal staff who had been with us for a long time. Grateful in the beginning that their unemployment could support them. That's obviously a different situation for a lot of people now. Our restaurants at Forge City Works, we closed for about 6 to 8 weeks and then did reopen. We don't serve people inside because we're worried about people's health and wellness, but we do provide curbside and pick up breakfast and lunch. When you talk about pivoting, we have totally pivoted our catering model to something called Fill Your Fridge, where you can order ahead of time for Tuesdays or Fridays, and we'll bring you everything from eggs and bacon to prepared meals to our famous quiches to curry chicken salad, and you can create your own kind of Fill Your Fridge model and either pick it up or we deliver it to your house. And that's actually growing as people settle into the fact they're probably going to be working from home for a long time. And also when people have to do things like homeschool, we even have a homeschool package so parents don't have to worry about getting snacks and lunch on the table as they're trying to work from home and also help their kids in school. So we're trying to protect the jobs that we have, sustain our training as much as possible, provide healthy food, and do it in a safe manner. But it's hard. It's hard to pivot. It's hard to not know when it's going to end. And honestly, one of the most difficult things, I think, is keeping everybody's emotional and physical wellness up where it should be, because there's a lot of depression and a lot of fear and a lot of the unknown. And we're just trying to work together and be there for each other as much as we can.
Carrie, thanks so much for sharing. I have, a lot of friends in the food industry, a lot of people working through those same challenges on a daily basis, finding new gigs and roles here and there. And then, there's just a lot of people unsure about what that future looks like at the moment. And probably a whole lot more we could dig into there. But Lillard, I'd like to hear a little bit more about sort of how all these things have had an effect on your world and food.
Well, thank you for the question, and I can certainly empathize with what Ms. Weed is saying. A lot of entrepreneurs, people who have the fiduciary duty of care to take care of these organizations that really take care of us, have had to make some really hard decisions. Personally, my company began to shift gears with retail, and so there is a certain level of insulation from the topsy-turvy kind of nature of the business, simply because we switched to dry goods. And as Ms. Whedon just mentioned, and because we're talking about, particularly food here, having a dry good is not quite a sweater, as you mentioned, that you can fold up and put on the shelf. However, it does sort of insulate our business model from the ups and downs of what COVID is doing right now, which is wreaking havoc on this sector. You mentioned the gig economy. I've noticed that even folks like me who have catering organizations, food service organizations, we've had to, the gigs aren't coming in as quickly as they used to, as lucratively as they used to. However, I like to begin to talk about in this forum. I like to begin to talk about some of the things that are happening on the innovation side. You see, innovation is happening everywhere. What I've noticed is that once we began to wrap our brains around the issue of what COVID was actually doing and what it was actually demanding of our industry, I began to do some research, and I reached out to some medical professionals and some fiduciaries. And what we did is I sat down with them and I developed a COVID-19 hazard mitigation plan that I was actually beginning to pass out to our customers, right? To potential customers and our actual customers. You see, what COVID is doing is COVID is creating fear, as well as wreaking havoc. But people are afraid. And for the innovator, for the entrepreneur, for the foodpreneur, if you will, the culinarian must find a way to innovate in this atmosphere. So the first thing we innovated was delivering to people some assuredness about what they are getting when they pick up the phone and call me and call Chef Jay, call Lillard Lewis, right? You have to kind of meet them where they're at and get them, get them to a safe place where they can say, okay, now I think I'm able to maybe do that 50th wedding anniversary gift for my parents or something like that. They've got a plan to mitigate the infections, right? But this also involves shifting gears on staffing, right? So now you have to bring in people who are doing COVID-19 related work, right? You have to make it a line item on your invoices. You have to give people not just the impression, but the assuredness that you are aware of what they are feeling. It's the same thing I feel when I go out to eat, right? I feel like there's a trepidation there. So that's the one innovation I say that we certainly engaged in. Currently, there are also other methodologies for innovating in the field. I'm sure Ms. Whedon, who has magnificent experience in this field. And by the way, I loved Firebox. I absolutely loved Firebox. It was one of my favorite places to go. I'm very sorry to see it close down. I'd love to be a part of it when it comes back around, because I know it will. We open up a brand new education, a brand new educational forum here. I can't tell you how many times I've had customers give me a call and say, hey, can I Zoom with you? I have to cook at home now. I need help. I can't go to Firebox anymore. I can't, I used to go to this restaurant or that restaurant. But you know what, there's a brand new educational frontier out there where we can begin to reach people now through the internet, over Zoom, over WebEx, to deliver education to them. I feel like in this forum, yes, we can talk about how bad things are, yes, but to the people out there listening and people out there, looking for a bit of assuredness, trust and believe there are people in this industry who are innovating solutions to the issues, and the gig economy will come back better and smarter.
Willard, thanks so much for your comments and for your positive pivot in the conversation. I think Carrie would probably agree that the restaurant industry was struggling, generally speaking, pre-pandemic, just in terms of shrinking margins, increasing costs, and those pieces. Innovation has become sort of a big topic. There's now lots of people concerned about delivery, takeout, and things like this. Just within Reset, we have 2 companies whose sole focus is figuring out how to change the ordering process in restaurants, or figuring out how to not only deliver food sustainably, like with electric cars and things like that. There's a whole host of things there, but would love to hear more about where we think the opportunities are from here. The restaurant industry is getting an opportunity to reset, an opportunity to think differently. Danny Meyer, the owner of Shake Shack, is a local alum from Trinity College, and Trinity had a conversation with him and another celebrity chef alumni, and Danny's been a big proponent of how the restaurant industry was in trouble before, and whether it's thinking about tipping or the relationship between how staff works and things like that. I'd be curious to hear your take on where the opportunities are coming out of this to do things differently, and what might need to change to do that.
Well, that's what we're looking at Firebox, and and to Willard's point as well, it's also, with everything, I've been around long enough, not long enough to have a pandemic, but long enough to know that, things go up and things go down. And, if you're a long-term entrepreneur, which I am, you have to work through it, you have to innovate, and you have to think about what the opportunities are. And I think right now, being able to engage our customers, they've been educated through the pandemic in seeing how impacted frontline workers, including restaurant workers, food producers, other folks involved in bringing food to America's table, whether it be out and about or at home, have been impacted both by losing their jobs. More than 5 million people have lost their jobs in the restaurant world. That's a huge number, and it hasn't stopped yet, let's be honest. But also understanding how on the edge many people in our industry live financially. And that even though prices at a dining table in a restaurant go up, actually, when you do the math, it doesn't work on lots of different levels. It doesn't work within margins. It doesn't work to pay people living wages. So we're looking at it as an opportunity to build a new kind of restaurant. And in that restaurant, we're talking about starting with a living wage. So, people start with $15 an hour. We're talking about potentially sharing tips from front of the house to back of the house. We're talking about different ways to promote people within the business, different ways to let people know that positions are available, and to create a menu that is also more accessible to more people, that certainly has sustainability at its center. We've always been a farm-to-table restaurant, but looking at some of the issues that Willard has brought up and bringing a wider swatch of people to the table. When we started Firebox, it was 15 years ago, and the idea was to bring wealth into a community. Well, it's a different world now. The idea now is, how do we all come together to create something that provides living wages and opportunities for everyone. So I'm super excited about that. I don't know where we're going to end up, but as you said, the business was in trouble before that. Restaurants open and close at an incredibly rapid clip. People really struggle to pay rents that are huge, and to pay They're not charging what it costs to put food on a plate, and customers, I think, are becoming more aware of that and need to be. The world goes out to eat way more often than used to be true 40, 50, even 10, 15 years ago. And the restaurant business has to catch up and professionalize in a way that means we need to take care of everybody that works at a restaurant and make sure that they are not standing at the edge of a cliff whenever anything happens. Now it's a pandemic. For individuals, it can happen with a family health crisis or somebody losing their housing, or people can't live that way, not just in the restaurant world, but in our society, they can't. We need to provide a community that looks at taking care of each other as one of its premier goals. Sorry to be in a soapbox.
No. Look, I enjoy the soapbox as well at times. What I will say from my proverbial soapbox is I believe that the African American and Latino community in particular had a pandemic before the COVID-19 pandemic when it came to caloric deficiency, nutritional deficiency. It went into every aspect of their lives. I mean, the pandemic for the African American and Latino community in this country has always been this inequality of the quality of calories. And we have been dealing with hypertension, high blood pressure. We've been dealing with diabetes. We've been dealing with heart disease, breast cancer, prostate cancer, uterine cancer. We've been dealing with everything from skin conditions to other comorbidities that came along with being obese. Now, the issue at hand, which is COVID, now presents us with an opportunity to change that dynamic, to change people's thinking about food. One of the things I have always been a proponent about is buying small, buying local, and buying fresh, right? It really does allow us to have a conversation about, for example, in that new cookbook that I'm coming out with, not to belabor the point, but I will say this: cardiovascular health, which is something that is being attacked by COVID-19, is greatly improved. That cardiovascular health is greatly improved by a plant-based diet, by regulating not only salt but potassium as well, and sugar in the diet. Things that have been in the Black community and the Latino community for so long can now become addressed with some urgency. Right. So what I'm finding is when people are asking me for the cookbook, they're asking me, hey, do you have anything in there with plant-based? What do you have in there that's healthy? I see an opportunity. There are a lot of parents out there who are bringing their kids home from school and realizing that rather than getting, and I know they're doing the best they can in the schools. I know it's the federal government and it's the state and local government. I know they're doing the best they can, but sometimes it's not the healthiest that they can get. Right. And when the parents have the kids home now for distance learning, this is an opportunity to get our kids almond milk. This is an opportunity to get our kids fresh vegetables. This is an opportunity to get our kids fruits and legumes and nuts and full range dietary needs addressed that they weren't necessarily getting in the schools. And again, they're doing the best they can, I know. But this is part of the shared vision that we need to have for our in Connecticut, certainly in the food industry. We need to have this shared vision of innovating our way out of emergencies, out of this pandemic. We can innovate our way out of this pandemic, and we can educate our way out of this pandemic. And I got to tell you, I learned a lot watching folks like Ms. Wheaton, right, who have been innovating in this community. You know that things do go up and go down. And that's one of the things I've learned from watching folks, who've been doing it a little bit longer than me. They say, hey, look, don't get discouraged. Do not get discouraged. Do not get down. Dig your heels in and begin innovating. And that's what the food industry is going to do. That's what we're doing right now.
Building off that, Willard, I'm just thinking to myself as you're saying it, Carrie, the idea of having started a farm-to-table social enterprise restaurant 15 years ago was probably somewhere near nuts. It was crazy. That was like two things that both were crazy, and you tried to do them both at the same time.
We opened it in 2008, right in the middle of the recession. So.
The other recession, yeah. So if there's someone
made decisions, but I think now actually, to go to Willard's point, working in community, working on these variety of issues that are all interconnected. Let's be honest, you know, I mean, the reason there's health disparities is around racism and it's around poverty. And, you know, the reason there aren't more job opportunities in fine dining are the same things. So this is an opportunity not to go, oh, we can't wait till we can get back to what we were, but to say, first of all, it's going to be a while until we get back to where we are. And let's open up a really big tent and bring people in, including customers, including consumers, including parents, and including restaurateurs, including the communities, and most especially including the workers that work in all this. We can build something better and bigger. And, you know, I've never been faced with challenges like this, and it scares me to death. But, you know, part of being an innovator and part of being an entrepreneur is using your fear as gasoline to move forward, to move the vehicle forward. You know, you got to. Otherwise, you're not an entrepreneur, and you're just going to go down. So you got to use the gas to keep moving.
Yep.
We have just a couple questions left, but I do want to just let the audience know that if they have any questions that they want to ask anyone up here, they're more than welcome to add their question to the chat. We will be having a short Q&A following the last questions here. I just want to reach back into a few of these points. And Carrie, you are another member of the Hartford Culinary Collaborative, which I was lucky enough to help start with a few other great organizations in the area as well, like Reset and Hands On Hartford, yourself and Knox, and a handful of others. And the big hope there is that we're able to create this community connection, and it's really focused on food businesses, but, you know, a big part of the food ecosystem is not only, you know, retail businesses like what you have going on, Chef, and restaurants and cafes and things, but there's also a wider industry at play, right? People are always going to eat. And how is it that we can, just as you said, Chef, connect these things locally, connect these things small, and find ways to make that sustainable? I think one of the things that came out of the pandemic was that we eat 2% of the food that we eat in Connecticut, or something to that effect, is grown in Connecticut. And that if we weren't able to ship stuff over the border, state to state, none of us have food to eat very quickly. And I would love to push that out to two people who probably understand this better than most, how we might begin to think differently and make some change in that space.
Well, you know, I'll say this. When I traveled to Ghana last year, I brought with me the hopes and dreams and aspirations of a lot of folks who wanted to get into farming, get into agriculture. You know, the catch-22, I suppose, in the topic that you bring up is that we suffer from I believe we suffer from two angles here. One, yes, we absolutely positively need to sell our products, our produce overseas, across borders. We need to have that collaborative atmosphere, but also, and by the way, that when that gets harmed in the market disruption as we see now, you know, that obviously has an effect on our economy. But we also need to get more young folks involved and interested in agriculture in the first place, the science of it. You know, there is a science to agriculture, right? And so what I notice is when I travel around Connecticut, especially in the first congressional district, second congressional district, out there in the quiet corner, especially, you know, there are farms. We are a huge farming state. Even a lot of the people, you know, my age and younger, they don't know that we're a huge farming state. There are dairy farms here that are just absolutely massive. There are you know, acres and acres and acres, square miles and square miles upon square miles of farming, of agriculture. And the way that this place has been hit, you know, people don't understand. You can't just, if you stop, you know, selling lobsters, let's just say, or stop selling dairy milk, and, you know, your buyers need to go somewhere else, that doesn't, you know, as soon as the market comes back, that switch just doesn't come back on like that. Right. Those are year-long, sometimes decades-long purchasing agreements that procurement officers and supply side of the market are entering into. Right. So when you lose a contract, or you lose a buyer or a seller, you can lose that business for a decade. And so what I would say is that, being a part of pretty much the end user side of the agriculture business here in the state, being the person who literally takes the pumpkins and the squash and creates the dish with it, you notice how much of a disruption it costs. What a disruption costs when you can't put your hands on things that you need. And when the people who are usually the people who are, putting the goods in your hands you can see the desperation on their face. And so we have to find ways to purchase more internally in Connecticut as well. And that's why what Carrie Wheaton did, in 2008 was so innovative, right? She provided a brand new market, a brand new economy for our local farmers. I thought it was brilliant and ahead of its time.
Well, I don't know about that, but thank you. I appreciate it. But I mean, really, buying local is about it, and not just buying local, but supporting urban agriculture. And, and that also goes to some policies and purchasing. When you talk about the school system, I know folks who work in the school system who would like to buy way more stuff locally, but, might not have the budgetary dollars to do that. So, really looking at it as an entire system, because, farming is a big backbone of Connecticut, but it's been under fire for 50 years, as more as gigantic, massive farming occurs in the Midwest and in other parts of the country. But every time you make a purchase, that's true all across the board. I mean, everything is a social enterprise, right? It's whether it's for profit and somebody you believe in, whether and what I always like to say to our customers, our parents, your customers, your readers is, your pocketbook is still the most important thing. And when you make those choices, they reverberate, and they reverberate hopefully in a positive way.
Yep. Thank you so much for all of that. We're going to try to wrap up with just a couple last questions here, making sure we make time for everything. So we have a lot of, this is about startups. This is about small business owners and entrepreneurs. And since both of you guys have that experience in spades here, just, one piece of advice for new folks thinking about getting started in this industry, what should they think about more? What are they not thinking about that your experience tells them they should be? Willard, maybe we'll start with you.
Okay. Think about your employees. Think about the people that are washing your dishes. Think about the people who are sweeping the floor. Think about the people who are cooking, right? The executive chef, the sous chef, the saucier, right? The salad cook, like all of them. They've all got families, in one way or another, they all have families. And sometimes in our industry, our industry can at times be very exploitive. And one of the things I believe this pandemic is teaching us is that, you can't exploit the pizza driver or the dishwasher and that not reverberate throughout the community. Think if you're starting a business today, think of think of yourself maybe 10 or 20 years ago and just say, I'm going to do right by my employees. I'm going to try to provide them healthcare. It may be a little bit painful, but I promise you, I promise you that people are paying attention. Customers are loyal to companies that pay attention to environmental governance, social and governance, ESG. That people are loyal to companies that treat their people right. That's what the millennials, myself and other millennials, that's what we're looking for when we're picking a company to be loyal to and go out and spend our money. We want to see a company that takes care of their people, because those are our neighbors. So that's the number one thing. If we got to name one thing, think about your people. Think about your people who are working with you and working for you, and understand that they have a family and that they need healthcare, a livable wage, and respect, because the entire world is realizing that we rely on those folks who we were trying not to give $15 an hour to. Now we'd pay them 3 or 4 times that amount to wipe down the carriage at the Stop and Shop, as long as they did it. You know, we would pay them gladly 3 times that amount to keep our families safe. And they're the ones who were going back in out there and wiping down those carriages and making sure the produce is on the shelves so that we can eat. That's what I'd say. Think about the people.
Thanks so much. Carrie, any thoughts on that for a new entrepreneur?
It's hard to follow that up because I agree 100% in every piece. I will say that, being an entrepreneur is the most difficult and the most joyful experiences that you can have, at least for me personally. And the joy was always connected to working in community and building something that just wasn't for you, but was for everybody else that was working together. And the toughest was, when you felt isolated. And when you look back at you're going to feel less isolated if you follow the kinds of things that Lillard is talking about. The isolation comes when you feel like it's all you, because nothing is ever all you, and you don't ask for help or community or buy-in, and you don't give buy-in in return. So it's a lesson that I've learned over time, because often when you're an entrepreneur, you have to have a strong ego, let's be honest, and you can feel like it's you and you alone. But there's nothing in the world that's you and you alone. So bringing in community and opening up that way, I think, is the biggest thing to remember when you're starting something.
Yes.
I can certainly relate to that, Carrie. Thank you for sharing. We have a couple of questions from the audience, and we'll see how much we can get through here. So the first one is about a popular topic here in Hartford in the food justice thinking about food deserts and the problem and trials of bringing fresh food into our local community. And, there's obviously things like farmers markets and different ways, but the question is really around what innovative ideas do you see really could make a breakthrough into change how we do that? And maybe it's not an innovation, maybe it is, maybe it's just organizing your community differently, but what opportunities do you guys see in terms of changing that paradigm here in Hartford or other cities like it?
Okay, so I'm sorry, Ms. Wheaton, did you want
No, go ahead, Lord. Go ahead.
What I would say is something I've been advocating for a very long time, and I'll be very quick. Buy smaller and more often. A lot of this, I fully believe in this. Buy smaller and buy more often. There's more foot traffic on the streets. Right now, obviously, in the pandemic, this is difficult. You want to make sure that you're doing social distancing, and a lot of people, need to be wearing masks and gloves and full PPE wherever appropriate. But when we talk about the impact on the industry, right? When we talk about what can be different, I fully believe that we can get healthier, and we can get we can give a boost to the economy by buying smaller and more often, right? Go to the store. Don't buy 10 apples if you're not going to eat 10 apples today or tomorrow or the next day, right? Buy for a day or two at a time. Revisit. Now, of course, be safe in the pandemic. I want to be clear. But when we go back to the grocery store, we turn the food culture into a more fresh-based culture. Right? We are more involved with our food. No more going to the grocery store and buying, $300 or $400 worth of food, stacking it up into the freezer, and then visiting again next week after we've wasted, most of that going to food waste. But I believe that not only does this promote buying more fresh produce and more fresh goods rather than canned goods, but it also puts more foot traffic on the streets to go and perhaps maybe, patronize some other businesses. And, again, in the COVID environment that, that could be a little tricky. Make sure you stay safe, but that's what I would say.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
My favorite example of that is that in Hartford, we have a plethora of corner markets and bodegas and things like that. And most of those owners, unfortunately, don't know that they're actually able to put out a fresh food and fruit stand. There's a great one on Zion. It's probably the best place to get fruit in Hartford. And recently I saw for the first time one opened up at the bodega on the same side of Broad Street as Billings Forge, but just on the other side of Russ. So hopefully that message is getting out. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Today has been really wonderful. I wanted to thank both of you guys for joining us. Thank you, Willard. Thank you, Carrie. And we unfortunately will have to call it at that. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you for having
us.
Alrighty.
Ms. Reed, I'll reach out. I believe I still have your cell phone. I'm going to reach out.
Go for it. I want to talk. Take care.
Pleasure, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.